The convoy died 3 miles into the Mekong Delta. Sergeant First Class Dara Vong watched the lead vehicle sink to its axles in what had looked like solid ground, and she knew they were all about to learn the difference between training and survival. 18 soldiers, 12 miles from extraction, and somewhere ahead, for men were carrying weapons that would kill Americans for the next decade if they crossed that border by dawn. She was already moving before the shout started. Captain Chen's vehicle had taken the worst of it, the front end dropping into a sinkhole disguised by morning fog and rotting vegetation. Dara reached the driver's door as water began seeping through the floorboards, dark and thick with something that smelled like decay. "Get him out," she ordered, and 2 soldiers responded without checking who had given the command. That was the thing about crisis. It did not care about rank. It cared about certainty, and Dara had learned certainty in places that did not exist on any official map. Captain Chun was unconscious when they pulled him free. Blood ran from a gash above his left eye where his head had struck the radio mount. Their medic, Staff Sergeant Nina Odia, was at his side within seconds, fingers pressing against his throat, checking his pupils, doing the calculations that meant the difference between evacuation and body bag. "He is stable," Oduya announced. "Concussion, probably severe. He needs a hospital, not a swamp." Dara looked at the sky. 6 hours of daylight remaining. 12 miles of terrain that had been swallowing armies since before her grandmother fled Cambodia. And a radio that had gone silent the moment Chen's vehicle hit the water. Before we continue with what happened next, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you have seen situations where everything went wrong at once, where the only choice was forward because there was nothing left behind. She moved to the communications vehicle and found Specialist Quevedo, their radio operator, desperately trying to coax life from equipment that had taken a full submersion. His hands were shaking, and he could not have been older than 23. "Talk to me," Doris said. Quevedo looked up with eyes that were trying very hard not to show fear. "Main unit is dead. Backup took water damage. I might be able to salvage something, but I need time, and I need it dry. And, Sergeant, there's nothing dry out here." She put a hand on his shoulder. "You will figure it out. That is why you are here." The words seemed to steady him, and she moved on because there were 17 other soldiers who needed to see someone acting like they knew what came next. Private First Class Wyatt Sims was struggling with his pack near the 3rd vehicle. The youngest member of the unit, he had been fighting to keep up since they left Firebase Kestrel, and the swamp was winning. His boots were soaked, his rifle was dripping, and his face had the gray pallor of someone whose body was beginning to fail before his mind accepted it. Sergeant Lundgren walked past him without stopping. "Come on, Boot. Nobody is carrying you." Dara intercepted Sims before he could collapse. She pulled his pack from his shoulders and added it to her own without breaking stride. "You stay on your feet," she told him. "You stay with me. We do not leave anyone behind." Sims nodded, something like hope returning to his expression, and Dara felt the weight of that hope settle onto her shoulders alongside 60 pounds of additional gear. This was what leadership cost. Not the rank, not the authority. The willingness to carry what others could not. Master Sergeant Colt Brennan appeared from the rear of the convoy where he had been assessing their remaining assets. He was a big man, broad and weathered, with 20 years of service written into the lines of his face. He had been career Army since before Dara was old enough to enlist, and he looked at her now with an expression she had seen before. 3 years ago, when he had recommended against her advancement. "What is our status?" Brennan asked, and the question was directed at the air between them rather than at her specifically. Dara answered anyway. "Chun is down, concussion, non-ambulatory. Radio is compromised. GPS is showing intermittent signal. We have 12 miles to extraction through terrain that just ate 2 of our vehicles." "Then we dig in," Brennan said. "Wait for them to send a search party when we miss check-in." "That is 6 hours from now," Dara replied. "And the targets will be across the border in 4. Brennan's jaw tightened. "The targets are not our primary concern anymore. Getting these soldiers home is." Around them, the team had stopped working. They were watching now, sensing the tension that had been building since this mission began. Dara could feel their eyes, could feel the calculation happening in their minds. 2 leaders, 1 decision, in a swamp that did not care about military hierarchy. She reached into her vest and removed a laminated photograph, edges worn soft from years of handling. Her father's face looked back at her, thin and serious, taken 3 months before the cancer found him. He had survived the Khmer Rouge by hiding in swamps like this one for 90 days. He had begged her never to join the military, never to put herself in places where the earth itself wanted her dead. She had joined anyway, because survival was not about avoiding danger. It was about proving you could walk through it and come out the other side. Dara tucked the photograph away and faced Brennan directly. We could do both. Get our people home and complete the mission. But we have to move now. Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the assembled soldiers, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 2 decades. All right, listen up. We are moving out in 10 minutes. Sergeant Vong will be handling terrain navigation since she seems to think she knows this ground better than anyone. He paused, letting that land. But tactical decisions go through me. Anyone have a problem with that? Hands went up. Lundgren. 2 others. Men who had served with Brennan for years, who trusted his experience over her expertise. Dara watched them choose, and she understood. This was not about competence. It was about loyalty. And loyalty, in the field, was the difference between a team and a collection of individuals waiting to die alone. They moved in single file through water that rose from ankle to knee within the first 100 meters. Dara took point because she had insisted and because Brennan had allowed it with the kind of permission that felt like a test. Prove yourself, his silence said, or prove me right. The swamp did not care about their conflict. It had its own agenda, patient and absolute, and it began taking their equipment piece by piece. Sergeant Coyle's rifle went first, slipping from his grip when a submerged root caught his boot and sent him face first into water the color of old blood. By the time he surfaced, the weapon had vanished in a mud that seemed to have no bottom. Coyle stood there, dripping and stunned, staring at his empty hands like they belonged to someone else. Keep moving, Brennan ordered. We will figure out weapons distribution at the next solid ground. Dara said nothing, but she noted the way Brennan avoided looking at her. 1 rifle gone in the first 10 minutes. 11 more miles to go. She led them around a cluster of mangroves that looked passable but smelled wrong. Her father had taught her that. The swamp tells you what it is, he used to say, his voice carrying the accent he never lost, the accent of a man who had spent 3 months hiding from soldiers who wanted him dead. You just have to listen. The path she chose added 200 meters to their route, but the ground held. Behind her, she heard Lundgren mutter something about wasting time, and she let it pass. Some battles were not worth fighting. Not yet. Private Sims was keeping pace now, staying close to her the way a child might stay close to a parent in a dark room. She had given his pack to Sergeant Odia, who had distributed its contents among 3 other soldiers without complaint. That was Oduya. Practical. Efficient. A woman who had learned that survival was a team sport long before the army taught her the same lesson. Odia moved up beside Dara as they navigated a stretch of relatively solid ground. How is Chun? Dara asked without turning around. Stable, Oduya replied. Pupils are responsive. He might wake up in the next few hours, but he will not be giving orders. She paused. You know Brennan is waiting for you to fail. Dara allowed herself a small smile. I know, and you're not worried. I've been waiting for me to fail my whole career. So far I keep disappointing myself. Odia laughed, a brief sound that seemed to startle the insects into silence. Then she dropped back to check on Shun, and Dara was alone at the front again, reading the swamp like a language only she could speak. The water rose to waist level in the second hour. Dara called a halt near a cluster of roots thick enough to support their weight, and the team gathered in a rough circle, weapons held above the waterline, faces tight with the effort of pretending this was manageable. Quevedo had the radio components spread across a waterproof tarp, his fingers working with the desperate precision of a man trying to solve a puzzle that might not have a solution. Dara crouched beside him. Any progress? He shook his head. I can maybe get 30 seconds of transmission if I bypass the damaged circuits. but I will need to find the right frequency, and without the main unit to scan, I'm basically guessing. Then guess well, she said, and she meant it as encouragement, but his face fell anyway. She moved away to give him space and found a moment of privacy near the edge of their temporary island. The photograph came out again, her father's face looking up at her from behind laminate that had survived 3 deployments and more close calls than she could count. He had been so thin in this picture. The cancer had already started, though none of them knew it yet. 6 months later, he would be gone, and she would be standing at his grave in dress uniform, finally understanding why he had never wanted this life for her. It was not that he feared she would die. He feared she would survive, that she would carry the weight of it the way he had, the things you did to stay alive, the things you saw, the way the swamp never really let you go even after you walked out of it. I'm still here, Baba, she whispered to the photograph. I'm still listening. A sound behind her. She turned to find Brennan watching from 10 feet away, his expression unreadable. Your father, he asked. She tucked the photograph away. He taught me about places like this. Brennan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I trained you 3 years ago at sniper school. You probably do not remember. I remember. His jaw worked. I recommended against your advancement. I know, Dar said. I read the file. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. They promoted you anyway. They did. He seemed to want to say more, but Lundgren appeared with a status report on their remaining ammunition, and a moment passed. Brennan turned away to deal with logistics, and Dara was left with the understanding that whatever was between them went deeper than this mission, deeper than a swamp that wanted them dead. The third hour brought the first equipment casualty that could not be ignored. Corporal Westbrook's rifle seized up completely, the action so fouled with moisture and debris that it would not cycle. He tried to clear it 3 times before accepting the truth. We are down 2 weapons, Brennan announced to no one in particular. If we lose any more, we will be throwing rocks at the enemy. Dara unslung her own rifle and held it up for the team to see. Her M40A6, bolt action, wrapped in oiled cloth that she had applied that morning before the convoy departed. The metal gleamed where everything else had gone dull with moisture. This is why I carry what I carry, she said. Semi-automatic is faster. But the bolt action keeps working when everything else fails. You strip it, you oil it, you wrap it, and you trust it. She looked at the soldiers watching her, at the doubt and fear and exhaustion in their faces. Same as us. We're going to make it through this because we're going to take care of each other and keep moving. 1 step at a time. 1 mile at a time. She did not wait for Brennan to respond. She turned and started walking, and one by one, the team followed. Behind them, the swamp swallowed their boot prints like they had never existed. The sun was beginning its descent when Quevedo caught up to her, his face flushed with something that might have been excitement or panic. I got it working, he said. 30 seconds, maybe 40. I found a frequency. What did you hear? He swallowed. Extraction has been pushed back. Weather coming in? They cannot get birds in the air until it passes. He paused, and she saw the rest of it in his eyes before he said it. And Sergeant, they do not know we are down. As far as command knows, we are still on schedule. The radio chose that moment to emit a final spark and die completely. Dara looked at the dead equipment in his hands, then at the team spread out behind them, then at the darkening sky above. 1 step at a time, she said again, but this time the words felt heavier. Night came to the Mekong Delta like a door closing. One moment there was light, gray, and filtered through the canopy. The next moment there was darkness, so complete that Dara could not see her own hands. She called a halt at the first solid ground they had found in 2 hours. A small rise, maybe 30 meters across, thick with vegetation, but stable enough to hold their weight without sinking. The team collapsed onto it like survivors of a shipwreck washing on a shore. Perimeter security, Brennan ordered, and 4 soldiers moved to the edges of their tiny island without complaint. Whatever tensions existed between leadership, the fundamentals remained. They were still soldiers. They still knew how to survive. Dara moved through the group, checking on each person individually. Corporal Westbrook had developed a cough that sounded wet and wrong. Private Sims was shaking despite the heat, his body fighting something it could not name. 2 more soldiers had lost equipment to the swamp, their packs simply vanishing into water that seemed to have hands. "We need to talk about what we are doing," Brennan said, appearing at her side. His voice was low, meant only for her. "We are moving toward extraction," Dara replied. "We are moving toward extraction with no communications, no backup, and equipment failing every hour." He paused. "And you want to chase 4 men who are probably already across the border." "They are not across yet. I saw them this morning, paralleling our route. They're taking the same path we are, because it is the only path." Brennan shook his head. "You do not know that. I know this terrain. I know how it moves, how it funnels everything toward the same choke points. They will be ahead of us, maybe 2 miles, maybe 3. If we push through the night, we can intercept them before dawn. And if we push through the night, we lose more people, more equipment. Maybe we lose everything." Dara turned to face him fully. "My father spent 90 days in a swamp like this one. 90 days hiding from soldiers who wanted to kill him. You know what he told me the secret was?" Brennan waited. "He said you do not fight the swamp. You become part of it. You move when it lets you move. You rest when it makes you rest. And you never, ever stop believing you will walk out the other side." For a moment, something shifted in Brennan's expression. Not agreement, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Then Lundgren's voice cut through the darkness. "We have a problem. They found him at the eastern edge of their perimeter. His flashlight pointed at something in the water." Dara reached him first and felt her stomach drop at what the beam revealed. Tracks boot prints in the mud, partially filled with water, but still visible. Military pattern, but not American. "Someone else is out here," Lundgren said, and for once his voice held no mockery, only fear. Dara knelt and examined the prints more closely. Fresh, maybe 2 hours old, probably less. The water had not had time to fully reclaim them. "How many?" Brennan asked. She counted the distinct patterns, following them with her light until they disappeared into the vegetation. "At least 6, maybe more. They came from the south and headed northeast." "Same direction we are going," Brennan said. "Same direction everyone goes. The swamp does not give you options." She stood and looked at the team gathered behind her. 15 faces in the darkness, waiting for someone to tell them what this meant. She could lie to them, tell them it was probably nothing, local fishermen or farmers taking a shortcut. But these were soldiers. They deserve the truth. "We are not alone out here," she said. "Someone else is moving through this swamp, and they are ahead of us. Could be militia, could be security for the targets we are tracking, could be something else entirely. What it means is we need to be smart." Oduya spoke up. "Smart how? We move quieter, we stay tighter, and we do not use lights unless absolutely necessary." Dara looked at each of them in turn. "The swamp is dark, but it is dark for everyone. We use that." Lundgren let out a bitter laugh. "Great. So we are stumbling blind through a swamp with hostiles ahead of us and no way to call for help. This just keeps getting better. Would you prefer to sit here and wait for them to find us?" Dara asked. Her voice was calm, but it carried an edge that made Lundgren take a step back. He looked to Brennan for support, but the master sergeant remained silent. After a long moment, Lundgren dropped his gaze. "Thought so," Dara said. "Now get some rest. We move in 2 hours." The team dispersed to find what comfort they could on the muddy ground. Dara remained at the perimeter, staring into darkness that seemed to stare back. Quevedo appeared beside her, his movements quiet despite the terrain. "Sergeant," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. How do you stay so calm?" He gestured vaguely at the swamp around them. "All of this, and you act like you have done it before." Dara considered the question. "My father used to tell me stories," she said finally, "about what he survived before he came to America. I grew up thinking that fear was something you carried, not something that carried you." She paused. "I'm not calm, Quevedo. I'm just good at choosing when to show it." He nodded slowly, processing this. Then he said, "For what it is worth, I am glad you are here. Not just Brennan. You." The words landed somewhere in her chest, warm and unexpected. She had spent so long fighting for respect that she had forgotten what it felt like to receive it freely. "Get some sleep," she told him. Tomorrow is going to be harder than today. He moved away, and she was alone again with the darkness and the sounds of the swamp. Somewhere out there, 6 or more unknown figures were moving through the same terrain, heading toward the same destination. Somewhere out there, 4 men were carrying weapons that would kill her fellow soldiers if they reached their buyers. And somewhere in her memory, her father's voice whispered the same words he had spoken every night of her childhood. The swamp takes everything, but only if you let it. She checked her rifle one more time, feeling the smooth action of the bolt, the solid weight of the weapon that had never failed her. Then she settled in to watch the darkness until it was time to move again. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, each step measured against the risk of sound. Dara led them by feel more than sight, her feet reading the ground beneath the water, searching for the roots and rises that meant stability. Behind her, 15 soldiers followed in her footsteps exactly, trusting her path because they had no other choice. The tracks they had found weighed on everyone. 6 sets of boots, maybe more, moving through the same swamp toward the same destination. Dara had spent the last hour running scenarios in her mind, none of them good. Local militia protecting the weapons shipment. Private security hired by the buyers. Or something worse, something she had not considered yet. Odia moved up beside her during a brief rest, her voice barely above a breath. Chun is getting worse. The movement is not helping. How bad? He needs real medical care within 12 hours. Maybe less. Odia's face was invisible in the darkness, but Dara could hear the strain in her words. I can keep him stable, but I cannot fix what is broken. Then we move faster. If we move faster, we lose more people. Dara had no answer for that. The math was simple and brutal. Push hard. Reach extraction sooner. Save Chun. Push hard. Exhaust the team. Lose someone else. Every choice had a cost, and the swamp collected payment in full. They pressed on. The first light of dawn found them at the edge of a clearing, a rare open space where the canopy broke and actual sky was visible overhead. Dara called a halt and pulled out her scope, scanning the terrain ahead while the team caught their breath. What she saw made her pulse quicken. Movement, maybe 800 meters out, partially obscured by vegetation, but unmistakable. For figures, 2 vehicles, the shapes angular and wrong against the organic curves of the swamp. The targets, still here, still moving, still within reach. Brennan appeared at her shoulder. What do you see? She handed him the scope without speaking. He looked for a long moment, then lowered it with an expression she could not read. That is them, she said. The weapons dealers. They're stuck, same as us. The swamp is funneling everyone toward the same crossing point, which means whoever left those tracks is probably their security. Probably. Brennan handed the scope back. So we have hostiles between us and the targets, and hostiles ahead of us that we are supposed to eliminate, with a team that is falling apart and no way to call for support. Yes. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You know, when I trained you 3 years ago, I told the review board you were too aggressive. Too willing to take risks that would get people killed. He shook his head. They said I was wrong. They said you had instincts that cannot be taught. Dara waited. I'm starting to think maybe they were right. It was not an apology, not exactly. But it was something. A crack in the wall he had built between them. Why did you recommend against me? She asked. The real reason. Brennan was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, my father died in a place like this. Vietnam. 1971. He was special forces, one of the best. Went into the jungle on a mission and never came out. They never even found his body. Dara understood now. The fear in his eyes when they entered the swamp. The way he flinched at every strange sound. This was not just a mission for him. It was a nightmare made real. I looked at you during training, Brennan continued. I saw someone who was not afraid of places like this. Someone who moved through danger like it was home. And I thought, that kind of soldier gets other people killed. Because they do not understand that some places are meant to be feared. Your father survived here for months, Dara said quietly. He understood the fear. He just did not let it make his decisions. Brennan looked at her, and for a moment she saw past the rank and the resentment to the man underneath. A man who had spent 50 years carrying a ghost he could not bury. Lundgren's voice broke the moment. Sergeant Vaughn, you need to see this. They found him at the rear of the formation, where two soldiers were struggling to help Private Sims stay upright. The young man's face had gone from gray to green, and his eyes were not focusing properly. Jumbo Rot, Oduya said, already examining him. It is in his feet and moving up. He's been hiding it since yesterday. Sims tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Dara knelt beside him, meeting his wandering gaze. Why did you not say something? She asked. Did not want to slow everyone down, Sims managed. Did not want to be the reason we failed. She felt something twist in her chest. This boy, barely old enough to vote, carrying an infection that was eating him alive because he did not want to be a burden. This was what the military made. Soldiers who would die before admitting weakness. You are not slowing us down, she told him. You are one of us. We do not leave anyone behind. Oduya pulled her aside. He cannot walk. Not anymore. Whatever is in his bloodstream, it is moving fast. He needs evacuation now. Then we carry him. For 12 miles through a swamp. For however far it takes. Brennan had been listening. He stepped forward now, his face set in hard lines. We cannot carry him and pursue the targets. You know that. We have to choose. Dara looked at Sims, then at the distant figures visible through her scope, then at the team watching her with exhausted eyes. We split up, she said. You take the wounded back toward extraction. I take volunteers forward toward the targets. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Brennan stared at her, and she saw the conflict playing out behind his eyes. Pride warring with practicality. Resentment warring with respect. That is not your call to make, he said finally. Then make it yourself. Dara held his gaze. But make it now, because those targets are not going to wait for us to finish arguing. The team stood frozen, caught between two leaders in a choice that would define everything that came next. The silence stretched until it became its own kind of pressure. 16 soldiers stood in the gray light of dawn, waiting for someone to decide their fate. Dara could feel the weight of their attention, the desperate need for certainty in a situation that offered none. Brennan spoke first. You want to split our forces in hostile territory with no communications and wounded that need constant care. He shook his head. That is not tactics. That is suicide. Staying together is not tactics either, Dara replied. It is surrender. Those weapons cross the border and American soldiers die for the next 10 years. That is not hypothetical. That is math. And if you get killed chasing them, who finishes the mission then? Whoever is still standing. The words came out harder than she intended, and she saw Brennan flinch. Around them, the team shifted uneasily, sensing the fracture that was about to become a break. Lundgren stepped forward. I am with the Master Sergeant. This whole thing has been a disaster since we rolled into the swamp. We need to cut our losses and get out while we still can. Two other soldiers nodded. Men who had served with Brennan for years, who trusted his judgment over hers. Dara cannot blame them. Trust was earned through time, and she had only had hours. Oduya spoke next, her voice calm and measured. I go where the wounded go. That is my job. But for what it is worth, I think Sergeant Vaughn is right. We did not come out here to fail. Quevedo raised his hand like a student in a classroom, then lowered it self-consciously. I will go with Sergeant Vaughn. Someone needs to try to get communications back, and I can work while we move. The team began to divide. 7 with Brennan, including the wounded, the medic, and the soldiers who had lost their weapons to the swamp. 5 with Dara, including Quevedo, Corporal Coyle, and 2 others whose names she barely knew, but whose eyes held something she recognized. The willingness to risk everything for a chance at something that mattered. Brennan watched the division happen with an expression that shifted from anger to resignation to something that might have been respect. When it was done, he approached Dara one final time. You have 4 hours, he said quietly. After that, we cannot wait. The wounded will not survive another night out here. I understand. He hesitated, then reached into his vest and pulled out a folded map, edges soft with moisture in use. My father carried this in Vietnam. It was in his personal effects, the only thing they recovered. I have had it for 40 years. He pressed it into her hands. The terrain has not changed that much. It might help. Dara looked at the map, then at the man who had opposed her at every turn. Why? Because you remind me of him, Brennan said. And because I was wrong about you. He stepped back. Do not die out there, Sergeant. That is an order. He turned and began organizing his group for movement. Within minutes, they were gone, swallowed by the swamp like they had never existed. Dara stood with her 5 remaining soldiers, the silence of the delta pressing in from all sides. She unfolded Brennan's map and studied the faded lines, seeing the paths his father had walked half a century ago. Different war, same ground. Same choices. We move fast and quiet, she told her team. No lights, no noise, no hesitation. We find the targets, we eliminate them, and we get to extraction before Brennan runs out of time. Coyle checked his rifle, one of the few still functioning. And if we run into that security detail, then we go through them. They moved. The swamp seemed different now, almost cooperative. Dara found paths where there should have been none. Solid ground, rising to meet her feet, as if the terrain itself had decided to help. She thought of her father, the stories he had told in his quiet voice, the lessons hidden inside memories that still gave him nightmares. He had not wanted this for her. She understood that now in a way she never had before. It was not that he thought her weak. It was that he knew exactly how strong she would have to become, and he had wanted to spare her that transformation. The photograph was still in her vest, pressed against her heart. She did not need to look at it. His face was carved into her memory, thin and serious and full of love he never quite knew how to express. I'm almost through, Baba, she thought. Just a little further. They covered 2 miles in an hour, moving faster than should have been possible. The targets were closer now, their trail fresh in the mud, their sounds carrying through the heavy air. 2 vehicles meant they were also struggling with the terrain, forced to find routes wide enough for wheels in a place that resisted anything man-made. Quevedo tugged her sleeve during a brief rest. He was holding the remnants of the radio, wires exposed like veins. I think I can get 1 transmission out, he said. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. But it would drain everything. 1 shot. Save it, Dara told him. When we need it, we will know. He nodded and tucked the radio away carefully, handling it like something precious. Which it was. In this swamp, 30 seconds of communication might mean the difference between rescue and disappearing forever. The sun climbed higher, burning through the canopy in scattered patches. Dara checked her scope and felt her breath catch. The targets had stopped. 800 meters ahead, partially visible through the vegetation, the 4 men were gathered around their vehicles. One of them was pointing at the ground, arguing with another. They were stuck. The swamp had finally caught them. She signaled her team to halt and studied the scene. 4 targets, 2 vehicles, and somewhere nearby, 6 or more armed security personnel who had left those tracks the night before. This was the moment, the chance she had divided the team for, the opportunity she had bet everything on. And then, from somewhere behind the targets, she heard voices. More figures emerging from the tree line. 8 of them, armed and moving with purpose. The security team had arrived, and now she was outnumbered 3-1. Dara pressed herself flat against the muddy ground and watched the security team fan out around the stalled vehicles. 8 men, well armed, moving with the discipline of professionals. These were not local militia or hired thugs. These were trained soldiers, probably former military from one of the regional powers, the kind of men who killed for money and slept well afterward. The 4 targets remained near the vehicles, their body language shifting from frustration to relief as their protection arrived. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, seemed to be in charge. He gestured sharply at the swamp ahead, clearly demanding solutions. The security team leader responded with a nod and began issuing orders. Coyle crawled up beside Dara, his breath shallow. 12 hostiles total. 6 of us. And they have the high ground. They do not have high ground, Dara replied. They have dry ground. There's a difference. She studied the terrain through her scope, reading the swamp the way her father had taught her. Water levels, vegetation density, the subtle signs that indicated where the ground would hold and where it would swallow you whole. The security team had positioned themselves on what looked like solid earth, but she could see the truth beneath the surface. That ground was temporary, a thin crust over mud that went down forever. "We cannot take them heedin," Quevedo whispered. He was clutching the damaged radio like a talisman, his knuckles white. "We're not going to," Doris said. She pulled out Brennan's map and traced a line with her finger. His father had marked something here, a path that curved around the main channel, coming up behind where the vehicles were stuck. 50 years ago, it had been solid ground. If the swamp had not shifted too much, it might still be passable. "You want to flank them," Coyle said. "I want to get into position." She folded the map and tucked it away. "The targets are the mission. The security team is an obstacle. We do not have to fight them. We just have to get past them." She split her small team into 2 groups. Coyle and 2 others would create a diversion on the eastern side, making enough noise to draw attention without engaging directly. Dara, Quevedo, and 1 soldier named Reeves would circle west, using her father-in-law's path to reach a shooting position behind the target vehicles. "If this goes wrong," Coyle said, "we are all dead. If we do nothing, those weapons reach their buyers and soldiers die for a decade." Dara met his eyes. "I would rather be dead than responsible for that." Something shifted in Coyle's expression. The doubt that had been there since the convoy sank seemed to drain away, replaced by something harder. Something certain. "Give us 20 minutes," he said. "Then make it count." They separated, and Dara led her 2 remaining soldiers into the swamp. The path on Brennan's map was still there, barely. A ridge of solid ground hidden beneath knee-deep water, invisible unless you knew exactly where to step. Dara moved by feel, testing each footfall before committing her weight, guided by instincts she had inherited from a man who learned to read terrain or die. Quevedo struggled behind her, his technical mind fighting against an environment that operated on different rules. Reeves was better, a quiet soldier who had said almost nothing since the convoy, but moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in difficult places. They had covered perhaps 400 meters when the first shots rang out. Coyle's diversion. The security team responded immediately, voices shouting, boots splashing, weapons orienting toward the eastern disturbance. Through breaks in the vegetation, Dara saw figures moving away from the vehicles, drawn toward the noise like predators toward prey. Now, she picked up the pace, sacrificing stealth for speed. The shooting position was close, a slight rise that would give her a clear line of sight to all 4 targets. If she could reach it before the security team realized the diversion was exactly that. The swamp fought her every step. Roots grabbed at her boots. Water rose from knee to waist. Something slithered past her leg, alive and muscular and utterly indifferent to human concerns. She ignored it all, focused entirely on the ground ahead, the path her father had survived and Brennan's father had mapped. They reached the rise just as the shooting stopped. Coyle's team had broken contact, melting back into the swamp as planned. The security team would be regrouping now, realizing something was wrong, beginning to search for threats in other directions. Dara had minutes at most. She unslung her rifle and settled into position, the familiar weight of the M40 steadying her heartbeat. Through the scope, she could see all 4 targets clearly. They had moved closer to one vehicle, clustered together as they argued about what the gunfire meant. 600 meters. Iron sights only, her scope cracked beyond use. Wind from the southeast, maybe 5 miles per hour. Humidity affecting bullet drop by fractions she would have to estimate. For shots. 4 targets. No margin for error. Quevedo crouched beside her, the radio in his hands. "Sergeant, if you fire, they will know exactly where we are." "I know. We will not make it out." Dara thought of her father, surviving 90 days in a place that wanted him dead. She thought of Brennan's father, walking into the jungle and never coming back. She thought of the soldiers who would die if these weapons reached their destination, young men and women who would never know that their lives had been traded for profit in a swamp on the other side of the world. "Get ready to send that transmission," she told Quevedo. "The moment I fire, you tell them everything. Our position, the targets, the situation. 30 seconds to change everything." He nodded, his hands trembling but his eyes steady. Dara exhaled slowly, feeling the world narrow to the space between her eye and the trigger. The first target filled her iron sights, his silver hair catching the light. She began to squeeze. She held the squeeze. Not yet. The targets were clustered, but not clustered enough. One clean shot might scatter the others into cover, and she would lose her chance forever. Patience, her father's voice whispered from memory. The swamp rewards patience. Through her iron sights, she watched the four men argue. The silver-haired leader was pointing at the stalled vehicles, his gestures sharp with frustration. The others were listening, their attention focused entirely on him. They had no idea Death was watching from 600 meters away. Quevedo shifted beside her, the radio clutched against his chest. His breathing was too fast, too loud. She reached out, without looking, and placed a hand on his arm. The contact seemed to steady him, and his breathing slowed. Reeves had positioned himself to cover their rear, his rifle pointed back the way they had come. He was a good soldier, quiet and competent, the kind of man who did his job without needing recognition. Dara wished she had learned more about him before this moment. She wished she had learned more about all of them. The security team was still searching for Coyle's group, their voices carrying across the swamp in fragments. They would realize the truth soon. They would turn back toward the vehicles and see the muzzle flash from her first shot. And then everything would happen very fast. She thought about Brennan, moving through the swamp with the wounded, racing against time, an infection, and a deadline that would not bend. She thought about Chun, unconscious and bleeding, and Sims, his body eating itself from the inside. She thought about Odia, keeping them alive through sheer will and dwindling supplies. They were counting on her, not just her team, but Brennan's team too. Everyone in this swamp was connected now, their fates woven together by choices made in desperation. The silver-haired man turned slightly, presenting his profile. The others shifted with him, following his gaze towards something in the distance. For one perfect moment, all four targets were aligned in a shallow arc, each one visible, each one still. Now, Dara's finger continued its squeeze, smooth and steady, the way she had practiced 10,000 times on ranges that now seemed like another life. The trigger broke. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The bolt action cycled with mechanical precision. The silver-haired man dropped. She did not watch him fall. She was already shifting, already acquiring the second target, already pressing the trigger again. The bolt action sang its simple song. Eject, chamber, fire. The second man spun and collapsed. Shouts erupted from the vehicle cluster. The remaining two targets finally understood what was happening, their bodies jerking into motion, seeking cover that did not exist. Dara tracked the third man as he ran, led him by a fraction, and fired. He went down mid-stride. The fourth target had made it behind one of the vehicles, only his legs visible beneath the chassis. She could not make the shot. Not from this angle, not with iron sights, not through metal and glass. Quevedo, she said. He was already transmitting, his voice rapid but clear, coordinates and situation pouring out of him in a stream of military precision. Firebase Kestrel, this is Specialist Quevedo. Emergency transmission. We have eyes on high-value targets at the following coordinates. 3 confirmed down, 1 remaining. Request immediate extraction and support. We are compromised and under strength. Repeat, we are compromised. The radio died in his hands, its final spark of life exhausted. 3 down, Reeves reported. 4th is behind the vehicle. Security team is turning back. Dara could see them now. 8 figures abandoning their search and moving toward the shooting position with frightening speed. They knew exactly where she was. The muzzle flash had painted a target on her back. We need to move, Quevedo said, his voice cracking. Not yet. Dara kept her eye on the vehicle, waiting for the 4th target to make a mistake. He had to move eventually. The swamp did not offer permanent shelter to anyone. Seconds stretched into eternities. The security team drew closer, their shouts growing louder, their weapons sweeping the terrain. Reeves opened fire, forcing them to cover, buying time with bullets they could not afford to spend. And then the fourth target moved. He broke from behind the vehicle and ran for the tree line, gambling that speed would save him where concealment had failed. Dara tracked him through her iron sights, calculating distance and wind and the desperate rhythm of his stride. She fired. The man stumbled, caught himself, kept running. A hit, but not clean. He disappeared into the vegetation, wounded but alive. Dara cursed under her breath. 3 confirmed kills, 1 wounded and fleeing. The mission was incomplete. "We have to go," Reeves shouted. "Now." She grabbed Quevedo and pulled him to his feet. They ran, abandoning the shooting position as bullets tore through the space they had occupied moments before. The swamp embraced them, water rising to their waists, vegetation closing around them like a living curtain. Behind them, the security team gave chase. Dara led her 2 soldiers through the maze of roots and channels, following paths that existed only in her instincts. The damaged map was useless now, soaked beyond recognition. She was navigating by feel alone, trusting the lessons her father had buried in her bones. 1 target remained. The mission was not finished. And somewhere behind her, 8 professional killers were hunting them through a swamp that showed no favorites. She thought of Brennan's deadline. 3 hours remaining, maybe less. Even if she survived the next few minutes, even if she escaped the security team, she still had to find the wounded target and finish what she started. The swamp had taken everything else. It would not take this. "Keep moving," she told her soldiers. "We're not done yet." They ran until the swamp would not let them run anymore. The water rose to chest height, forcing them to slow, to push through the murk with deliberate strokes, while bullets snapped through the canopy overhead. The security team was close, too close, their pursuit relentless despite the terrain. Dara spotted a cluster of mangrove roots rising from the water like skeletal fingers and pulled her team toward it. They pressed themselves into the tangle of wood and shadow, bodies submerged to their necks, only their faces visible above the dark surface. The security team passed within 20 meters, their voices sharp with frustration. They were searching systematically, fanning out through the vegetation, probing every possible hiding spot. One of them stopped directly in front of the mangrove cluster, his eyes scanning the water with cold efficiency. Dara held her breath. Beside her, Quevedo's entire body was trembling, vibrations rippling through the water in tiny waves. She found his hand beneath the surface and gripped it tightly. The trembling slowed. The security man stared at their hiding spot for an eternity. Then someone called out from further ahead, and he turned and moved away, rejoining the search pattern. They waited until the sounds of pursuit faded into the swamp's constant whisper. Only then did Dara allow herself to breathe. "He is still out there," she said quietly. The 4th target, wounded but mobile. Reeves checked his rifle, wiping mud from the action with practiced hands. "How do we find him before the security team finds us?" Dara thought about the wound she had inflicted. The target had stumbled but kept running, which meant the bullet had hit somewhere non-vital. Leg, maybe your arm. He would be bleeding, leaving a trail even in this environment. And he would be heading for the border crossing, the only destination that mattered. "He cannot move fast," she said. "Not with that wound. And he will stick to the main channels because he does not know this swamp the way we do." "You mean the way you do," Quevedo said. There was something in his voice that had not been there before. Respect, certainly, but also wonder. She ignored the comment and pulled out the remains of Brennan's map. The paper had disintegrated in the water, but she had memorized the key features during their approach. The border crossing was northeast, maybe 2 miles from their current position. If the target was heading there on foot with a bullet wound, he would be moving slowly and carefully. "We parallel the main channel," she decided. "Stay in the deep cover, move faster than he can. We get ahead of him and set up an ambush." "And the security team?" Reeves asked. "They are behind us now. If we keep moving, we stay ahead." She looked at both men, seeing the exhaustion in their faces, the fear they were fighting to control. "I know you were tired. I know this is more than anyone signed up for. But we are close. One more target, and the mission is complete. Quevedo straightened slightly in the water. You got us this far, Sergeant. We're not quitting now. Reeves simply nodded and began moving in the direction she had indicated. They traveled in silence, navigating by the angle of the sun filtering through the canopy. The swamp seemed calmer now, almost peaceful, as if the violence of the past hour had been absorbed into its endless depths. Dara knew better than to trust that peace. The Delta had been swallowing soldiers for centuries. It did not care about sides or causes. It only cared about patience. An hour passed, then another. The main channel appeared on their left, a ribbon of open water cutting through the vegetation. Dara signaled a halt and scanned the opposite bank through her iron sights. Movement. A figure stumbling through the shallows, one arm hanging limp at his side. The fourth target, exactly where she had predicted he would be. He was maybe 300 meters away, an easy shot under normal circumstances. But normal circumstances meant a functioning scope, a stable platform, and a target that was not weaving unpredictably through cover. She would have to get closer. Stay here, she told Quevedo and Reeves. Cover the channel. If the security team appears, do not engage unless you have no choice. What are you going to do? Quevedo asked. Finish it. She slipped into the water and began moving parallel to the channel, keeping the vegetation between herself and the target. The mud sucked at her boots with every step, trying to pull her down, but she had spent her entire life learning to resist that pull. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, the same words he had spoken 1,000 times during her childhood. The swamp wants you to stop. Never stop. She closed the distance meter by meter, her rifle held above the water, her eyes never leaving the stumbling figure ahead. 200 meters. 150. 100. The target stopped. He had reached a point where the channel narrowed, forcing him to cross through deeper water. He stood at the edge, swaying slightly, his good hand pressed against his wounded arm. Even from this distance, Dara could see the dark stains spreading across his sleeve. He looked around, sensing something wrong, his survival instincts screaming warnings his conscious mind could not interpret. His gaze swept across the vegetation, across the water, across the exact spot where Dara crouched with her rifle raised. Their eyes met. For one frozen moment, hunter and hunted stared at each other across 100 meters of swamp. Then the target moved, lurching forward into the deeper water, gambling that speed would save him one more time. Dara exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The bolt cycled. The target splashed face first into the channel and did not move again. For shots. For kills. Mission complete. She stood there in the chest-deep water, her rifle smoking, her heart pounding, and felt something she had not expected. Nothing. No triumph. No relief. Just emptiness and the distant sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the heavy air. The helicopter rotors grew louder, beating the air with a rhythm that meant either salvation or death. Dara could not tell which yet. She pushed back through the water toward Quevedo and Reeves, her legs burning with exhaustion, her rifle still warm in her hands. Target is down, she reported when she reached them. 4 for 4. Quevedo's face split into a grin that looked almost painful. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Dara corrected. That transmission bought us everything. The helicopters were visible now, two dark shapes cutting across the gray sky. American markings. Dara felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had been carrying so long she had forgotten it was there. Then the gunfire started, not from the helicopters, from behind them. The security team had found their trail and was closing fast, bullets shredding the vegetation around their position. Reeves returned fire immediately, his rifle cracking in controlled bursts while Dara and Quevedo scrambled for cover. They found us, Reeves shouted between shots. 8 of them, maybe more. They are angry. Dara assessed the situation in seconds. The security team was approaching from the south, cutting off their retreat. The helicopters were circling overhead, looking for a place to land in terrain that offered no clearings. and her team was pinned down with limited ammunition and no way to communicate their position. "We need to move toward the extraction point," she said. "Draw the helicopters to us." "The extraction point is 200 meters north," Quevedo said. "Through open water." "Then we go through open water." She broke from cover and ran, trusting her team to follow. The swamp erupted around her, bullets sending up geysers of mud and water, the security team pouring fire at the fleeing Americans. She heard Reeves grunt behind her, but did not stop. Stopping meant dying. The open water was worse than she had imagined. Waist deep, then chest deep, with no cover and no concealment. They were completely exposed, 3 figures struggling through the channel, while professional killers lined the bank and took aim. A bullet tugged at her sleeve. Another creased her shoulder, a line of fire that made her gasp but did not slow her down. Behind her, Quevedo was struggling. The dead radio still clutched to his chest like he could not bear to let it go. "Drop it," Dara screamed at him. "Quevedo, drop it and move." He looked at her with wide eyes, then released the radio and surged forward with renewed speed. The useless equipment vanished beneath the surface without a trace. The helicopters were descending now, their door gunners finally identifying the threat. Heavy weapons opened up on the security team's position, the massive rounds tearing through vegetation and flesh with equal indifference. The pursuit fire slackened, then stopped entirely as the killers scrambled for cover of their own. Dara reached the extraction point and turned to count her people. Quevedo was there, gasping and terrified but alive. Reeves was there, one hand pressed against his side where blood was seeping through his fingers. "How bad?" she demanded. Reeves looked down at his wound with an expression of mild surprise. "I think it missed anything important." He coughed. "Hurts like hell, though." The first helicopter touched down in a spray of muddy water, its crew chief waving frantically for them to board. Dara pushed Quevedo toward the bird first, then helped Reeves hobble through the shallows. The door gunner kept firing, keeping the security team pinned while the extraction completed. She was the last one in. She grabbed the crew chief's hand and hauled herself aboard just as the helicopter lifted off, the swamp falling away beneath them like a nightmare releasing its grip. For a long moment, she just sat there on the metal floor, breathing, existing, trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. Then the crew chief was shouting in her ear, his voice barely audible over the rotor noise. "Sergeant Vaughn, we have radio contact with the other element. Master Sergeant Brennan's group." Dara's head snapped up. "Status." They made it to the secondary extraction point. "Wounded are aboard the other bird, but they took fire 20 minutes ago. Militia unit found them before we could get there." "Casualties?" The crew chief hesitated. "2 wounded, Sergeant. Master Sergeant Brennan is one of them." The words hit her like a physical blow. She grabbed the crew chief's arm. "How bad?" He took a round, getting the casualties aboard. "Leg wound, maybe worse. Doc is working on him now." Dara looked out the open door at the swamp scrolling past below. Brennan, who had opposed her at every turn. Brennan, who had given her his father's map. Brennan, who had admitted he was wrong and ordered her not to die. He had taken a bullet protecting the soldiers she had left in his care. "Get me to that bird," she said. "Sergeant, we are en route to Firebase Kestrel. Medical priority for the wounded. I need to see him." The crew chief studied her face for a moment, reading something there that made him nod. "I will tell the pilot. We can fly formation, close enough to transfer once we are out of hostile airspace." Dara settled back against the bulkhead and closed her eyes. The mission was complete. The targets were dead, but the cost was still being calculated, and she was afraid of what the final number would be. She thought of her father, surviving 90 days in a place like this. She thought of Brennan's father, who had not survived at all. Some people walked out of the swamp. Others were carried, and some left pieces of themselves behind that could never be recovered. The helicopter banked north, carrying her toward whatever came next. The 2 helicopters flew in tight formation over terrain that gradually shifted from swamp to farmland to the ordered geometry of military infrastructure. Dara spent the entire flight staring at the other bird, trying to see through its metal skin to where Brennan lay bleeding. Reeves had passed out from blood loss, his head lolling against the bulkhead while a medic worked on his wound. Quevedo sat beside her, silent and shell-shocked, his hands still making the motions of operating a radio that no longer existed. They had all left pieces of themselves in that swamp. Some pieces were visible. Others would take longer to find. Firebase Kestrel appeared on the horizon, a sprawl of temporary structures and permanent purpose. The helicopters descended in tandem, touching down on adjacent pads while medical teams rushed forward with stretchers and urgency. Dara was off the bird before the rotors stopped spinning. She pushed through the organized chaos of a landing zone, her eyes searching for Brennan among the bodies being unloaded from the other helicopter. She found him on a stretcher, his face gray and slack, his leg wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. Oduya was beside him, still working, her hands moving with the desperate precision of someone fighting against time. "How bad?" Dara demanded. Oduya did not look up. Round went through his thigh, nicked the femoral artery. "I got a clamp in the field, but he lost a lot of blood. He needs surgery now." The medical team took over, lifting Brennan's stretcher and rushing him toward the field hospital. Dara followed until a nurse blocked her path with a firm hand. "You cannot go in there, Sergeant. Let them work." She stood at the entrance to the surgical bay, watching through a small window as doctors surrounded the man who had given her his father's map. The man who had spent 3 years believing she was a mistake, and 3 days learning otherwise. Oduya appeared beside her, finally allowing herself to stop. Her uniform was soaked with blood and swamp water, her face drawn with exhaustion. But her eyes held something like peace. "Chun is stable," she reported. Concussion was severe, but not critical. He woke up during the extraction, started giving orders from the stretcher. Oduya allowed herself a small smile. "Sims is going to lose 2 toes to the rot, but he will keep the foot. Everyone else is walking wounded." And Brennan. The smile faded. "You took that bullet getting Sims aboard the helicopter." Militia came out of nowhere, started shooting at the extraction zone. Brennan grabbed Sims and carried him the last 50 meters with rounds hitting all around them. He made it to the bird and shoved Sims inside. And that is when he got hit. Dara closed her eyes. The man who had questioned her judgment, who had resented her advancement, who had split the team rather than follow her lead. That man had carried a wounded soldier through enemy fire and taken a bullet so someone else could live. "He told me about his father," she said quietly. "About what happened in Vietnam." Oduya nodded. "He told me too. During the march, when things were bad. He said he'd spent his whole career running from this place, and now that he was finally here, he understood something." "What?" "That his father did not die because of the swamp. He died because he was the kind of man who went into the swamp for his people." Oduya paused. Brennan said he finally understood what that meant. "What cost?" Dara turned back to the window. The surgeons were working steadily, their movements calm and practiced. Brennan lay motionless on the table, his life measured in the steady beep of monitors and the careful work of hands trained to repair what war had broken. She thought about her father again, the stories he had told, the lessons he had hidden inside them. He had survived the swamp, not because he was stronger or smarter than the men who hunted him. He had survived because he refused to let the swamp decide when his story ended. Brennan had made the same choice. He had walked into his nightmare and found something on the other side. Not redemption, exactly. Something simpler. The understanding that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act anyway. Hours passed. Dara refused to leave the window, refused food and water, and the increasingly insistent suggestions that she get herself checked by medical. Quevedo joined her for a while, then left to file his report. Oduya came and went, shuttling between patients, keeping the wounded alive through sheer determination. Finally, a surgeon emerged from the bay, pulling off bloody gloves with the weary satisfaction of a battle won. "He is stable," the surgeon said. "Lost a lot of blood, but we got the artery repaired. He will need months of recovery, probably a medical discharge. But he's going to live." Dara felt her knees go weak. She braced herself against the wall and let the relief wash over her in waves. "Can I see him?" "He is not conscious," but you can sit with him if you want. The surgeon studied her face. You are Sergeant Vaughn, the one who took down the targets. Yes. He nodded slowly. Brennan was talking before we put him under. He kept saying your name, kept saying you were the best soldier he ever trained. She did not know how to respond to that. So she simply walked past the surgeon and into the recovery bay, where Brennan lay pale and still but breathing, alive, carried out of the swamp by the same determination that had carried her. She pulled a chair beside his bed and sat down. The photograph of her father was still in her vest, pressed against her heart. She pulled it out and held it where Brennan could see it if he opened his eyes. We made it, she told him quietly. Both of us, just like our fathers would have wanted. Brennan woke at dawn. Dara had fallen asleep in the chair beside his bed, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion despite her determination to keep watch. She did not know what pulled her back to consciousness. Perhaps the change in his breathing. Perhaps something deeper, some instinct that recognized when the waiting was over. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling with the confused focus of someone trying to remember where they were and how they got there. Then his head turned slowly, and he saw her sitting there with her father's photograph still clutched in her hand. Vaughn, he said. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. You look terrible. She laughed, a sound that came out closer to a sob. You should see yourself. He tried to smile, but the effort seemed to exhaust him. His eyes drifted to the photograph. That your father? Yes. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the face of a man he had never met. He looks kind, he said finally. Tired but kind. He was both. Tell me about him. So she did. She told Brennan about her father's childhood in Cambodia, about the terror of the Khmer Rouge, about the swamp where he had hidden for 90 days while soldiers searched for survivors to execute. She told him about the refugee camps, the years of waiting, the eventual journey to California where he had built a new life from nothing. She told him about the small apartment in Stockton where she had grown up, about her father's job at the fish market, about the way he would come home smelling like the ocean and sit with her at the kitchen table to help with homework. She told him about the stories he shared only at night, only when her mother was asleep, stories of darkness and survival that he never wanted his wife to hear. And she told him about the cancer, the slow fade, the final weeks when he had begged her one last time to choose a different path. Any path that did not lead to places like the one she had just walked out of. He was afraid for you, Brennan said when she finished. He was afraid I would become like him. Dara looked at the photograph, that I would survive something that would never let me go. Brennan shifted on the bed, wincing at the movement. I spent my whole life afraid of that too. Becoming like my father, going into a place I would never come back from. He paused. That is why I tried to stop you. Not because I thought you were not good enough. Because I thought you were too good. Too willing to walk into the dark. I know. When we split up in the swamp, I thought I was protecting my people from your recklessness. Brennan's jaw tightened. But when that militia came out of the trees and started shooting, I understood something. I understood that fear does not protect anyone. It just delays the moment when you have to choose. You chose, Doris said. You carried Sims through the fire. I chose because of you. Because I watched you choose first. His eyes met hers. You walked into that swamp like you belonged there. Like it was your home. And I realized that is what my father must have looked like. That is what courage actually is. Not the absence of fear. Just the refusal to let fear make your decisions. Dara felt tears threatening and forced them back. She had spent so long fighting for respect, for recognition, for the simple acknowledgement that she belonged. And now, in a hospital bed on the other side of the world, the man who had opposed her most fiercely was giving her something she had not known she needed. Permission to be exactly who she was. I recommended against you 3 years ago, Brennan said. I was wrong. I'm going to fix that. You do not have to. Yes, I do. He reached out and took her hand, his grip weak, but steady. When I get back to the States, I am writing a new evaluation. A real one. The one you deserved from the beginning. Dara squeezed his hand. What are you going to say? The truth. That you're the finest soldier I have ever served with. That you see things other people miss and do things other people cannot. That the Army is lucky to have you. He paused. That I am lucky to have learned from you. She did not know what to say. So she said nothing, just held his hand while the morning light grew stronger through the window. The door opened, and Odia entered, her face brightening when she saw Brennan awake. "Look who decided to rejoin us." She moved to check his vitals, her hands gentle and efficient. "You scared us, Master Sergeant." "Takes more than a bullet to kill me," Brennan replied, "though I do not recommend testing that theory again." Oduya smiled. "The others are asking about you. Sims especially. He wants to thank the man who carried him through the fire." Brennan's expression softened. "He's a good kid. He just needed someone to believe in him." Dara thought about that moment in the swamp, when she had picked up Sims's pack and told him they did not leave anyone behind. She had not known then that she was setting something in motion, that her choice would ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could not predict. That was leadership, she realized, not the rank or the authority, just the willingness to choose and to let others see you choosing. "Get some rest," she told Brennan. "We have a long flight home." He nodded, his eyes already growing heavy. "Vong," he said as she stood to leave. "Yes, thank you for not giving up on me." She looked at him one last time, this man who had been her adversary and become something else, something like family. "That is what we do," she said. "We do not leave anyone behind." 3 weeks later, Dara stood in a hangar at Fort Bragg while a general she had never met pinned a bronze star to her chest. The ceremony was larger than she had expected. Word of the mission had spread through channels both official and unofficial, and soldiers she had never served with had found reasons to attend. They lined the walls of the hangar in dress uniforms, watching as the general read citations that described events she still saw when she closed her eyes. Sergeant First Class Dara Vong displayed exceptional valor and tactical brilliance under circumstances that would have broken lesser soldiers. Her actions directly resulted in the elimination of 4 high-value targets whose weapons would have claimed countless American lives. Her leadership preserved her team against overwhelming odds and exemplified the highest traditions of military service. The words sounded strange to her, formal and distant, like they described someone else entirely. She thought about the swamp, about the mud and the fear and the endless weight of water trying to pull her down. She thought about her father's photograph, still tucked in her dress uniform, pressed against her heart where it had been through everything. The general shook her hand and moved on to the next recipient. Quevedo received a commendation for his emergency transmission. Reeves, still walking with a slight limp, was awarded a Purple Heart. Coyle and the others who had created the diversion were recognized for their courage under fire. And then it was Brennan's turn. He rolled forward in a wheelchair, his legs still healing, his face thinner than it had been in the swamp. But his eyes were clear and steady as the general pinned a silver star to his chest. Master Sergeant Colt Brennan demonstrated extraordinary heroism in direct combat with hostile forces. Despite sustaining a severe wound, he personally carried a fallen soldier to safety under enemy fire, ensuring the successful extraction of all personnel. His selfless actions reflect the highest credit upon himself and the United States Army. Dara watched him accept the medal with the quiet dignity of a man who had made peace with something that had haunted him for decades. When the general finished, Brennan turned his wheelchair to face the assembled soldiers. His eyes found hers across the hangar, and he nodded once. A small gesture, a private acknowledgement, everything they had shared in the swamp, compressed into a single moment of recognition. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed into small groups, conversations flowing around coffee and shared memories. Dara found herself standing alone near the hangar doors, watching the North Carolina sky shift from afternoon gold to evening gray. Quevedo appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one without speaking, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "I put in for sniper school," he said finally. "Figured I should learn to do more than carry broken radios." "You'll be good at it," Dara replied. "I had a good teacher." She smiled at that. "You saved all our lives with that transmission. 30 seconds and a prayer. Do not underestimate what you did." He shrugged, but she could see the pride he was trying to hide. "What about you, Sergeant? What comes next?" She had been thinking about that question for 3 weeks. The army had offered her a training position, a chance to shape the next generation of soldiers the way Brennan had once tried to shape her. It was a good assignment, stable and respected, the kind of role that built careers. But when she closed her eyes, she still saw the swamp, still felt the water rising around her, the weight of her rifle in her hands, the absolute clarity of knowing exactly what needed to be done. "I am staying in the field," she said. "There's more work out there." Quevedo nodded like he had expected that answer. "Then I hope I end up on your team someday." He walked away, and Dara was alone again with the fading light. A voice behind her. "I thought I might find you hiding from the crowd." She turned to find Brennan wheeling toward her, his silver star gleaming on his chest. He stopped beside her and looked out at the same sky she had been watching. "You should be resting," she said. "I have been resting for 3 weeks. I'm tired of resting." He paused. "I submitted that evaluation I promised. Sent it up the chain this morning. You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." He turned to face her fully. "I spent 20 years afraid of becoming my father. Afraid of the swamp, afraid of the dark, afraid of caring too much about people I might lose. And then I met you." Dara waited. "You walked into every nightmare I ever had and came out the other side, carrying people who would have died without you. You showed me that my father was not a cautionary tale. He was an example." Brennan's voice roughened. "I'm grateful for that. More than I can say." She reached into her uniform and pulled out her father's photograph. The edges were worn now, softened by swamp water and time and the constant pressure of being carried against her heart. "He would have liked you," she said. "He always respected people who learned from their fear instead of being ruled by it." Brennan looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he reached into his own pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The map his father had carried in Vietnam, dried and pressed, and preserved despite everything the swamp had done to it. He handed it to her. "Keep it," he said. "Something to remember that fear is just the beginning of courage, not the end." Dara took the map and held it alongside her father's photograph. 2 legacies. 2 men who had walked into the darkness and found something worth carrying back. "Thank you," she said. Brennan nodded and wheeled away, leaving her alone with the evening sky and the quiet certainty that she had become exactly who she was meant to be. If this story moved you, drop a comment and share what resonated most. Maybe you know someone who found their courage in the hardest moment, or maybe you have walked through your own kind of swamp. Either way, thank you for being here until the end. Dara tucked both artifacts away, her father's face and a dead soldier's map pressed together over her heart. Then she walked out of the hangar and into whatever came next, ready for the swamp, ready for the dark, ready for everything. Because that was what survivors did. They kept moving forward.